Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a case that it really starts with something you see all the time, a celebrity death. But it just spirals into this incredible story of identity theft, conspiracy, and just decades of the most unimaginable betrayal.
It really does. And what we're doing here is piecing together the true story behind Evie Renge, the celebrated literary genius.
Right, everyone knew her.
Everyone. But we're also digging into this explosive claim that her entire life, her entire persona was a lie built on stolen trauma. The sources we have are, well, they're staggering. We've got police files, private letters, and the raw, unfiltered notes of the immediate family.
And specifically from the daughter.
Specifically the daughter, Mackenzie Casper, who was 21 at the time. So our mission really is to act as detectives here. We're moving backward from a very suspicious death to uncover the real woman whose talent is basically turned into a product, and her identity was just violently stolen.
That's the key, isn't it? When you look at these sources, you realize the crime wasn't just, literary fraud.
Yeah.
It was a fundamental theft of a person.
Of a whole personhood.
Yeah. We're not just analyzing a fictional plot here. This is the mechanics of a real-life conspiracy that lasted for 21 years and generated millions and millions of dollars. So let's start where the world started, with the shocking end of Evie Renge.
Okay.
The date is marked by this huge global moment of mourning. Evie Renge, author of these macabre, emotionally devastating thrillers, her pen name for Elizabeth Casper, is dead. What was the official story they put out?
The official ruling was, and this feels almost insultingly simple given the drama, misadventure.
Misadventure.
Just that. The police report said she slipped and fell, fatally cracked her head on a rock during her usual early morning walk. And this happened right on the edge of their enormous 7,000 square foot estate.
An estate that was really the symbol of the whole empire.
Absolutely. It symbolized the wealth, the status, everything this literary brand had generated. The sources described the ending as, far too boring, too pedestrian for the kind of genius she was supposed to be.
And the world's reaction just underlines how powerful that brand was. You had fans staging these massive, almost theatrical tributes. Social media was just flooded.
Oh, completely. And the media immortalized her with that one specific, very stylized portrait. You've seen it.
The one with the raven black hair, the striking red lipstick.
Yep, the lacy high-collar blouse, and always with that backdrop of deep red roses. She was the brilliant genius, the queen, the sweet personality, this Gothic literary icon.
That image was everything.
It was meticulously crafted. It was like a shield. But if you look behind the velvet rope of the public memorial service, the atmosphere was completely different. The hall was packed. The speeches were eloquent. But the feeling was described in one source as just eerie quiet. Less a celebration of a life.
And more a very carefully managed performance. And the person with the best seat for this whole performance was her daughter, Mackenzie Casper. She's our key witness here, and her perspective just immediately shatters that public myth. The sources we have capture her internal monologue, and it is brutally honest.
Mackenzie is 21, and she's just standing there watching this whole spectacle with this intense, almost physical contempt. She admits she can't cry. She feels bitterness, resentment, and this profound lack of care that has been building up for 2 decades.
So she's looking at this polished coffin, this whole veneer, and she's thinking.
She's thinking she had it coming. She deserved to die. I just wish it had happened sooner.
Wow, that is an extraordinary thing to think of your own mother's funeral. We're conditioned to expect grief, but this is raw, visceral hatred. Where did that come from? What was the source of that resentment?
Mackenzie felt perpetually eclipsed by the Evie Renge brand. Think about it. She loved writing herself, but her mother treated her submissions with this, casual dismissal. But then she'd turn around and use Mackenzie's minor successes on social media as props. Oh, right. Posting things.
Exactly. My daughter is so brilliant. I hope she follows in my footsteps.
And Mackenzie saw this as a constant reminder that she was only valuable if she served as an extension of the primary brand. Always walking behind the footsteps, never beside them.
It really speaks to this idea that the persona, the queen of the Gothic thriller, just sucked all the oxygen out of the room. The energy the mother poured into her global fandom was just absent when it came to her own child.
Precisely. And the entire family unit at that memorial confirms this performative, almost transactional dynamic. You've got Ben Casper, the husband. He's described as looking dashing but sulking.
Dashing but sulking. So he's distressed, but maybe not grieving.
Not in the way you'd expect. And he's being tightly managed by his own mother, Evelyn Casper, who is, of course, dressed head to toe in Dior.
Evelyn Casper. She sounds like the puppet master here, both financially and emotionally. She's restricting Ben's too early in the day intake of booze. She's making sure he doesn't crack under the pressure.
It's not a family in mourning. It's a corporation doing damage control. And that damage control fails almost immediately. Because Mackenzie sees something, right? A private, hidden interaction that confirms this is not a routine death. It's an active crisis.
This is the moment in the hall. Ben Casper, the grieving widower, is desperately whispering to a stranger, a man Mackenzie later identifies as a blackmailer.
At the memorial service.
At the memorial service, Ben is frantic. He hisses at him, "You scumbag, don't you dare mention my daughter."
And the blackmailer's reply.
It's so unsettling. He says, "Oh, she doesn't. Well played, Benny boy."
Benny boy. The speed and the secrecy of that exchange tells you a few things right away. One, the secret Ben is trying to bury involves Mackenzie directly.
Right, and two, the blackmailer knows the secret is so catastrophic that he has the leverage to show up in public at a memorial and press his advantage.
And three, the blackmailer seems to believe Mackenzie's completely in the dark. That "oh, she doesn't" implies she's unaware of the real situation.
Yeah, and that name, Benny boy, it implies this intimate, shared past that Ben would clearly rather forget. It immediately shifts the focus from Evie Renge's death to this immediate ongoing threat to Ben Casper. It confirms the whole facade was already crumbling before the author even died.
So as Mackenzie's trying to process this, she's also thinking about two other critical secrets. First, her mother's office.
The locked office, it was always locked, the sacred writing haven. But Ben, the husband, he kept a spare key.
He kept it hidden.
Hidden inside, the source says, a rubbery indigenous mask in the hallway. Which is just such a strange detail.
It is. And that locked office, it wasn't a sign of creative boundaries, was it? It feels more like fundamental mistrust between Ben and the woman he called his wife. Why hide the key if the marriage was solid?
Exactly. It completely foreshadows the truth. Whatever secret Evie Renge was protecting, Ben knew how to get to it, and he was clearly planning on doing just that.
And the second secret is maybe the most personal and terrifying for Mackenzie. It's about her health.
Right. She reveals she has an inherited genetic condition that requires ongoing medication. And in this act of, defiance, she had hidden the doctor's visit and the diagnosis from both her parents.
She even admits part of her wanted them to feel regret when she eventually just dropped dead from their neglect. It's so dark.
It's incredibly dark, and this is where her paranoia becomes completely justified. Shortly after her mother's death, she finds Ben searching the office, frantically looking for life insurance papers.
Not for his wife.
No, specifically, a massive life insurance policy taken out on Mackenzie.
So just think about that. Your mother dies under suspicious circumstances. Your father is whispering with a blackmailer at the funeral. And then you discover he's looking for your life insurance policy, knowing you have a serious, undisclosed health condition.
The only conclusion you can draw is that they either anticipated a problem or, worse, they planned for her early demise. The entire atmosphere is just one of profound danger and calculation.
It absolutely sets the stage for this deep dive. The author is dead, the family is scrambling to bury a secret, and the only person who can uncover the truth is the daughter who feels like she has nothing left to lose.
She realizes the investigation is now deeply personal. It's not just about her mother's identity, it's about her own survival.
Okay, so let's follow Mackenzie's investigation from there. She's paranoid, she's desperate for answers, and then the mystery deepens with a delivery that is almost, well, it's too theatrical to be real.
An anonymous package arrives. Inside is a series of handwritten letters, pages just ripped from a notebook, and they're all signed with this simple, affectionate closing. "Love, Mom."
With a little note attached.
A cryptic little invitation. "Want to know a secret?"
Now, if you're Mackenzie, your first thought has to be, this is a sick joke, or a fan trying to capitalize on the death.
Of course. But the content of the letters immediately makes it feel intimate and specific. They reference a very specific time and place. Old Bow, Nebraska, 22 years ago.
Which was the tiny college town where her parents supposedly met.
Exactly. This isn't random. This is highly personal information that connects directly to the accepted Casper family origin story.
So Mackenzie has the means, that spare key hidden behind the mask, and she has the motivation. She sneaks into the locked office, the so-called writing haven, to do her own little forensic analysis.
And this is the definitive turning point. She pulls out the original manuscript, the foundation of the entire Evie Renge empire. the acclaimed bestseller, Lies, Lies, and Revenge. She compares the handwriting in that anonymous letter to the handwriting on the original manuscript page.
Yeah.
And the proof is undeniable. They are identical. The pen strokes, the slant, the specific way certain letters are formed, it confirms that the author of those private, loving letters to Petal is the exact same person who wrote that multi-million-dollar masterpiece.
Which means, definitively, the woman they just buried, Elizabeth Casper.
Was not the person who wrote the book. The sources say that on the cover of the old college notebook these letters came from, the original author's name was neatly written, Elizabeth Dunn.
The realization must have been immense. The entire foundation of the Casper fortune, Mackenzie's entire life, was built on a stolen identity.
The weight of that. I mean, can you even imagine? The literary genius she resented, the neglect, the posturing, the celebrity life, all of it was owned and executed by an imposter.
And the letters then start to fill in the blanks about the real Elizabeth Dunn's past.
Yes. We learned she was this smart, highly motivated loner who grew up facing just profound adversity at a place called the Keller Foster Care Facility Group Home in Brimville, Nebraska. She describes her college experience working 3 jobs on a full scholarship, absolutely determined to escape what she called her crappy life.
And then she meets Ben Casper.
Ben Casper, handsome, popular, comes from a wealthy family. He was paying his own way through college, but he was a struggling student. He was everything Lizzie wasn't. Established, comfortable, socially validated.
But the relationship was toxic from the start.
Completely. Lizzie describes Ben as her first love, but he was fundamentally a user. He clung to her mostly because she had a place for him to crash and was too focused on her writing to, restrict him. Her friend later puts it so bleakly, saying Ben treated her like a discounted motel room.
Oof. Let's dig deeper into where Elizabeth Dunn's extraordinary talent came from, because this is where the genius and the trauma really start to intertwine. The letters reveal this profound history of pain that she'd kept secret for decades.
She reveals she was assaulted by 3 boys at the group home, an act of violence she never told the staff or the police about. It was a trauma she carried internally, but she channeled that pain directly into her writing. She describes finding this terrifying satisfaction in detailing fictional acts of revenge.
She called it vindictive satisfaction. The moment she realized the screams of pain she wrote about when her fictional characters were tortured actually felt satisfying, that was the moment she understood she was turning her own victimization into a mechanism for revenge.
And that, you see, is why her fiction was so potent. It wasn't researched, it was lived. It was raw, unapologetic, riveting. Her dark manuscripts, like The Wolf Whistle, are just full of torture, bloodshed, and these intricate betrayals. She was writing what she wished she could do, and the world was buying it by the millions.
The fact that the entire literary empire was built on the real, undisclosed trauma of Elizabeth Dunn. It just adds this layer of morbid irony. The woman who stole her identity was essentially selling Elizabeth's darkest secrets for a massive profit.
Exactly. And the letters provide the first clue that this trauma wasn't just fueling her fiction. It was connected to a real, deadly incident that happened at the very group home she was so desperate to escape. The lines between Elizabeth Dunn's internal world and the external conspiracy are now getting dangerously blurry.
This is where the investigation pivots from, intellectual property theft to cold-blooded murder. Mackenzie, armed with the evidence of the identity fraud, starts to realize that the horrific revenge plots in her mother's books might be rooted in something real.
She actually theorizes, I think my mom hurt people.
Which is a massive psychological leap to make.
It's huge, but she has the motivation now. The identity thief was profiting off a genius writer channeling trauma, and the letters confirmed that trauma involved 3 boys at the group home. And then, crucially, Mackenzie finds an anonymous note, something the blackmailer must have used before, which states, I know what you did to those 3 boys in the barn.
That specific reference, the 3 boys, the barn, that gives Mackenzie and her friend EJ, who's described as this brilliant programmer who can get information not always legally enough to go on, they search the archives.
And they pull the 30-year-old police file on the Brimville barn fire. And the details in that archive file are grim. It confirms the barn fire killed 3 teenage boys who lived at the Keller Foster Care Facility. And it was not an accidental tragedy. The specifics just scream homicide.
Let's break down the details from the reports. The toxicology confirms the victims were highly intoxicated.
Right, with both alcohol and prescription drugs. And the fire was started with gasoline, an accelerant. So this already points away from, just a simple structural fire.
But the most damning evidence, and the reason the case was never fully closed, was a forensic finding about a partially burned steak found outside the barn.
Yes. The investigator noted that the imprint on that steak was a perfect match for the barn door handles.
So someone started the fire with gasoline, and then, knowing the boys were incapacitated by alcohol and drugs, they used a wooden stake to lock the door from the outside, making sure they couldn't escape.
And then after the fire died down, they came back, removed the stake, the evidence, and got rid of it.
That shows a level of premeditation that is far beyond simple vengeance. This was an execution.
And while the case was ruled inconclusive, lack of witnesses, lack of funding, pretty typical for a Longo low-priority case involving foster kids, the implication of deliberate murder is just overwhelming.
And now we have three central figures tangled up in this tragedy. Elizabeth Dunn, the assault victim and writer, Ben Casper, the cheating boyfriend, and Tanya Schaffer.
The rival from the group home. The letters reveal the confrontation that tied the fire directly into the identity plot. Elizabeth wrote that Ben was cheating with Tanya, and Tanya, when she found out Elizabeth was pregnant and nearing her book deal, confronted the real Elizabeth. She used the barn fire as leverage.
With the exact words from the note.
The exact words, "I know what you did to those 3 boys in the barn."
And Elizabeth's account in the letter. She admits it, doesn't she?
She admits she set the initial fire. She says she just wanted to scare them, to make the boys who assaulted her regret it. She claims the fatal outcome was an accident, that she never meant for them to die. This is vengeance motivated by trauma.
But the narrative shifts when we get Tanya Schaffer's perspective, which comes out later in the documents.
Right. Tanya confirms she saw Lizzie set the initial gasoline fire. But Tanya herself was already compromised. She admits, out of jealousy, because the boys liked Lizzie more and her own boyfriend Brandon had left flowers for Lizzie, she had already spiked their liquor with prescription drugs to teach them a lesson.
So Tanya was also seeking vengeance, but for a different, more petty reason, romantic jealousy. But then she took the critical, fatal step that Elizabeth only attempted.
Correct. Tanya confesses to coming back after Lizzie left and being the one who locked the barn door with a pole, ensuring the boys' deaths. She transformed a potentially fatal act of revenge into a guaranteed triple homicide.
That distinction is just crucial, isn't it? Elizabeth Dunn's act was fueled by trauma and rage, but Tanya Schaffer's was calculated murder driven by envy and a desire to control the narrative.
Which aligns perfectly with her later theft of Elizabeth's entire life.
It does. It tells you that the woman who became Evie Wrench wasn't just an identity thief. She was a murderer covering her tracks. And the fact that Tanya was described in the police report as being inconsolable at the time.
Yeah. It wasn't because she was mourning her boyfriend Brandon. It was because she was ensuring her own criminal involvement was masked by feigned grief. The web of deceit started decades before any literary fame.
So now we move to the horrific genesis of the literary fraud itself, the identity switch. This happens 21 years ago. Tanya Schaffer, murderer and rival, now realizes Elizabeth Dunn is pregnant and has a book deal on the table. Elizabeth is no longer just a rival, she's leverage.
Tanya's ambition is just ice cold and utterly ruthless. She encourages Ben, who's already compromised and scared, to stay with Elizabeth. She insists that Elizabeth owes me. Tanya recognizes that Elizabeth Dunn's talent, this genius born from trauma, is an immensely valuable, bankable asset.
And the confrontation that finally breaks the relationship and triggers the identity theft, it happens at Tanya's isolated lake cabin.
Yes, Elizabeth, very late in her pregnancy, shows up, confronts Ben and Tanya about the cheating, and declares the relationship over. She says she's going to raise the baby alone with her book money.
And this is where the planning meets the crisis.
Right then and there, Elizabeth's water breaks prematurely. What follows is just a scene of utter brutality, and it's crucial to understanding the charges that are later brought against the Caspers.
Tanya refuses to take her to the hospital.
Coldly refuses, claims they don't have time. She forces Elizabeth to endure a traumatic remote birth right there at the cabin. And Ben, the supposed father, he just dissolves into hopelessness and gets completely drunk.
So Tanya, the murderer, takes charge.
She delivers the baby, Mackenzie, who Elizabeth calls Petal. But instead of making sure the mother is safe, Tanya's priority is disposal. Immediately after this traumatic birth, when Elizabeth is postpartum and mentally non-responsive, Tanya administers heavy sedatives.
This isn't just neglect. This is a deliberate act of disabling her. Tanya is transforming Elizabeth Dunn from an author and a mother into a catatonic patient. She's removing the only person who can expose her.
The sources paint a picture of just chilling efficiency. With Elizabeth neutralized, Tanya immediately executes the identity theft. She dyes her hair raven black, matching the real Elizabeth's distinctive color, creating what's described as an uncanny resemblance.
And the very next step is securing the money. She calls Elizabeth's agent, Iliana Roth, impersonates Elizabeth, and sets up a deal for a hefty advance.
And you have to ask yourself, how did Iliana Roth, the agent, not notice a change? A change in voice, in mannerisms, in presentation?
It's a huge question. The sources suggest Iliana Roth was willfully blind. The potential payoff was enormous, millions of dollars. Iliana was already known for prioritizing the bottom line over her author's well-being.
She probably just justified the change in personality as, post-trauma shock or the transition from a struggling student to a massive celebrity. The money blinded everyone, including the one person whose job it was to protect the author.
So Ben Casper, horrified but completely morally bankrupt, just goes along with it.
He does, and Tanya finally declares the terrifying new reality to him. I am Lizzie. And then, regarding the real Elizabeth Dunn, she says, we need to get rid of her.
Ben is too cowardly to commit murder himself.
But he facilitates a lifetime of confinement and abuse. He abandons the catatonic Elizabeth at that isolated lake cabin. He convinces himself that she is the unfortunate one, making her a burden he can dispose of rather than a victim he betrayed. He chose comfort, wealth, and the manufactured life of Evie Renge over the woman he supposedly loved.
And this is where Evelyn Casper, Ben's mother, officially enters the criminal enterprise. The sources confirm that initially Evelyn wanted nothing to do with Elizabeth Dunn, this scholarship student from a group home.
But once the book deal and the pregnancy were confirmed, everything changed.
Suddenly she was an asset.
A huge financial asset. Evie Renge, the talent, was a commodity. They leveraged this stolen genius, creating a criminal organization that protected the secret for 2 decades. The family wasn't just hiding a crime, they were actively profiting from the forced confinement of the real Elizabeth Dunn, all thanks to the ambition and wealth the literary world provided.
So the identity theft is solidified. For 21 years, Tanya Schaffer lives as Elizabeth Casper, the literary star, while the real Elizabeth Dunn is confined and medicated. And Mackenzie, 2 decades later, finally begins the unraveling. She follows the clues back to Nebraska with her friend EJ.
Their first stop is the physical site of the trauma, the Keller Foster Care Facility in Brimville. The sources describe it as abandoned, decrepit. One just calls it hell. It's a physical manifestation of the dark origins of the whole Evie Renge story.
But the real investigative breakthrough comes from a person. Diane Jacobson.
Yes, the 73-year-old former group home housekeeper. She was like the godmother to the kids, the one person they trusted who wasn't part of the system.
And Diane confirms the truth about the sexual assault. She also confirms that Tanya had manufactured a story to protect the group home board from scandal, which again just shows Tanya's calculation.
But the biggest reveal happens when Mackenzie shows Diane the iconic author portrait of Evie Renge. The slick black hair, the red lipstick, the high-collar blouse.
The red roses.
Diane looks at it, and the truth for her is immediate and unmistakable. She says, unequivocally, that's not Lizzie, that's Tanya. The woman she knew, the brilliant, trauma-scarred Lizzie Dunn, was gone, replaced by a ruthless imposter.
And Diane points out a fascinating little detail about that famed Gothic author persona.
The red roses, yes. Diane reveals that the real Lizzie Dunn was severely allergic to most flowers. The prominent red roses featured in every author portrait, every book jacket, were a total fabrication.
A detail likely added by Tanya to fit the brand.
Exactly. It was the simplest, most human detail that the imposter got wrong, and the housekeeper who truly loved the author noticed it immediately.
The betrayal just deepens as Mackenzie expands her investigation. She confronts John Robertson, Lizzie's old college friend and emotional confidant, who had been strangely evasive toward the Casper family over the years.
Mackenzie really pressures him, asking why he cut off contact, and John confesses. He saw the Evie Renge author Tanya Schaffer at a university lecture years earlier. He recognized her and was so disturbed by the impersonation that he secretly followed her to confirm the switch.
So John knew the secret, but was too afraid to expose this multi-million-dollar literary celebrity, especially since Ben was involved.
Right. He validates Mackenzie's deepest suspicion, confirming that Ben is in on it, and he reiterates Ben's character as a user who treated Lizzie like a discounted motel room.
You have to acknowledge John's guilt here, too. He knew for years but stayed silent, terrified of confronting the powerful Casper family machine.
Absolutely. His confirmation helps Mackenzie piece together the sheer scale of the conspiracy, and that realization just fuels the final stages of her search.
And while Mackenzie is on the trail of her missing mother, we get the true closure on the misadventure that started this whole story. Detective Jimenez, who initially suspected foul play because of fresh tire tracks near the body, is still quietly investigating the official accident of Evie Renge of Tanya Schaffer.
And Diane Jacobson delivers the shocking final twist. She reveals that she had been tracking the imposter. She found the fake Evie Renge, Tanya, in the woods and confronted her with a shotgun, demanding to know where Lizzie was.
Talk about frontier justice. So what happened next?
Tanya, arrogant and laughing, completely confident that an elderly woman couldn't touch her, slipped. She fell awkwardly and fatally cracked her head on a rock. The exact cause of death ascribed by the police: misadventure.
The irony is just. It's breathtaking. The police ruled the death a tragic accident, but it was, in fact, a direct result of Diane's pursuit of justice.
The woman who deliberately locked 3 boys in a burning barn decades ago was killed by a slip and fall, undone by her own hubris and the consequences of her original crime. Diane saw it, quite rightly, as fate working in mysterious ways.
But the trail didn't end with Tanya's death. Mackenzie was still looking for the final piece of the puzzle: the blackmailer. The man Ben was whispering to at the memorial, Benny Boy.
Mackenzie and EJ used their resources to track the blackmailer's supply bills. They discovered the bills were being paid by Ben's Shell Company Etched Properties, LLC, and the supplies were being delivered by a place called Huckleberry Supplies. Those bills led them directly to the remote lake cabin.
Tanya's inheritance, the site of the horrific birth.
The lake cabin was the origin point of the fraud, and it remained the prison for the real Elizabeth Dunn. They find a private nurse there who confirms her patient is a woman named Tanya, a name the Caspers likely assigned to the real Lizzie to confuse any potential investigation.
And the nurse says the patient rarely speaks, but she writes a lot of beautiful stuff that doesn't make much sense.
Which confirms that even in her medicated, confined state, the genius of Elizabeth Dunn was still seeking expression. She was writing the very letters that Mackenzie had been receiving.
And then comes the moment of discovery.
The real Elizabeth Dunn, frail and aged from decades of neglect and confinement, walks out. John gasps, recognizing his old friend. But Mackenzie sees something more immediate, an uncanny reflection of herself. She is looking at her own face.
And the woman who had suffered 21 years of forced isolation looks at her daughter, her petal.
And whispers that name, the only word of affection she had been able to write in all those hidden letters.
So the discovery of Elizabeth Dunn at the cabin is the definitive proof. The identity theft of Evie Renge is instantly exposed, and the story just explodes globally. It's labeled the literary fraud of a century.
The immediate legal fallout is catastrophic for the Casper family. The FBI gets heavily involved because of the interstate nature of the fraud and the severe criminal charges. Ben Casper, Evelyn Casper, and the agent Lema Roth, they all face immediate charges.
And it's important to focus on what those charges are, because they go far beyond just fraud.
Right. They are charged with conspiracy, abduction, and a lifetime of slavery. That's the legal architecture they use to describe the forced confinement and involuntary servitude of Elizabeth Dunn, whose talent was monetized against her will for 2 decades.
The psychological aspect of that slavery is just profound. They weren't just exploiting her work, they were exploiting her trauma. And you see them trying to cover their tracks right up to the end.
Even after Tanya's death, Ben and Evelyn had rushed to empty Lizzie's room at the estate to destroy any potential DNA evidence that would connect the imposter to the stolen identity.
And what about Lima Roth, the agent? She almost gets away with it.
She tries. She claims she never met the original Elizabeth Dunn and was just unaware of the false identity because she was blinded by the success. But the press immediately exposes her long history of hiring ghostwriters to cover the gaps in Tanya's ability to produce content consistent with the original Elizabeth Dunn's brilliance.
So the fraud wasn't subtle. It was maintained by money, fear, and a network of collaborators who prioritized profit over a person.
Exactly.
But the unraveling continues for Mackenzie on a deeply personal level. A year after the discovery, she's rereading the letters, and one final, fragmented clue pops out.
Maybe Ben has nothing to do with you at all.
And that fragment plants the final seed of suspicion. It links back to the blackmailer's mysterious comment, "Oh, she doesn't. Well played, Benny boy," implying Ben wasn't the father.
The final confrontation happens at Thanksgiving dinner a year later. John, Professor Robertson, who had been avoiding the Caspers for years and who Mackenzie now counts as a trusted friend, he looks shocked when Mackenzie mentions her inherited genetic condition.
And Mackenzie is sharp. She connects the dots. She confronts him, shows him her prescription bottle, knowing John is a highly educated man.
And John finally breaks. He admits the truth. He knew he was her father after her health episode confirmed they shared the same genetic marker. He was Elizabeth's friend, her confidant, the one who comforted her the night she was conceived. The real Elizabeth Dunn knew John was the father.
Which explains the fragment in the letter. Elizabeth Dunn never wanted Ben Casper, the user and the coward, to have any hold over her child. She was protecting Mackenzie long before the identity theft, even if she couldn't protect herself.
And this is the ultimate bittersweet relief for Mackenzie. She spent her life hating Ben, the man she believed was her biological father, the man who betrayed her mother. Now she knows the man she hated was just the conspirator, not her parent. Her real father, John, is a kind, honest man, now finally free to be part of her life.
So she finds her foundation, her justice crew, John, Diane, and EJ, who evolved from best friend to her partner. They provide the secure, loving structure she never had.
And Elizabeth Dunn, the true genius, is receiving long-term therapy. But she's safe. And she's finally connected to her daughter, her petal. The stolen legacy has been reclaimed.
It's just incredible how this deep dive went from analyzing a simple misadventure to exposing a complex conspiracy that provided justice for the confined victim and healing for the daughter who grew up in the shadow of the fraud.
When you look back at the entire trajectory of this story, the Brimville barn fire, the traumatic birth, the 2 decades of confinement, what stands out is just the sheer scale of the deceit and the cold, transactional nature of the Casper family's motivations. The celebrated literary genius was a fraud, the daughter was effectively abducted, and the husband and his mother were criminal conspirators operating a lifetime of forced confinement.
And the so-called accidental death of the frog, Tanya Schaffer, was in fact an act of retribution. It was fate working its mysterious will to punish the identity thief and the original murderer for the barn fire decades earlier. It brings this macabre sense of balance to the whole narrative.
The most profound revelation, I think, is the real legacy of Elizabeth Dunn. She channeled her profound, unresolved trauma into macabre, brilliant writing. And she found connection in this strange form of healing, not through the fame the imposter stole, but by writing those intimate letters to her unborn daughter, Petal, while she was confined in isolation. The writing was always her lifeline, the authentic genius that the world monetized but never truly saw.
And that brings us to the final provocative thought for you, the learner. Ben Casper's parents, Evelyn, were only drawn into this whole enterprise after learning about the impending book deal and the promise of astronomical wealth. They saw Evie Renge, the talent, as a valuable financial asset worth any level of criminal exposure. So in a world that is so obsessed with success and wealth, the metrics of the literary world, in this case, how easily can genuine talent become just another commodity? A commodity that justifies and masks even the most horrific criminal enterprises, like abduction and forced confinement.
It forces you to question the cost of fame and what kind of criminal risks people are willing to take when millions and millions of dollars hang in the balance.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.